How difficult is it to balance a full-time profession with a full-time passion?
I used to be a little bit of a closet runner.
So my dad called up and said, there is this guy, the matches, the astronomical, whatever the stars are matching okay, but he seems a little crazy.
I'm the uncle, who is the fit uncle, right? I want to be that going on. I want to be running a marathon like Fauja Singh, who at the age of 90 plus ran marathons with his 60-year-old kids. There is this popular quote that is there, that on t-shirts and things like that says, if you find me collapsed on the side of the road, please pause my garment. So the best I have done is a 36 hours fast, not having eaten anything for 30 hours, and then a 5-hour run after that. Perhaps be the happiest if I leave no footprints in the sands of time.
Do you know why you run? Finally, after all these years? This is Life Unbounded, a series of conversations and stories of creators, achievers, and leaders from all walks of life. People who have made a meaningful difference to life and the society around them. And I'm your host, Shashikiran. Welcome back to part 2 of the conversation with Manoj, the elite ultra runner. So far we spoke a lot about your passion. Let's also talk about your profession, which is going alongside your passion for the last 2 decades and more.
Yeah.
I'm interested in a couple of things. One, how has your career progressed post your graduation, post your post-graduation as well? And how has it gone alongside a very strong and involved running career? And what has been the attitude of people around you to your passion?
Right. So it's interesting we bring it up this way, and I usually tend to keep the two things separate as much as possible. Right. So my running is something that I used to be a little bit of a closet runner, if you will. Right. So and my professional career kind of took its own shape. I'm now in mid-level management in a process mining company. It's a German-based startup called Celonis. And I've always been on, all right through after I've graduated from IIM-Lucknow, I've always been on the sales or the pre-sales side. I never had sales targets and responsibilities, but I've also never moved away from the trenches. Always been very close to the customer. So I get involved in this right from the second conversation and talk about the problems that they have and how you solve it with IT solutions.
Right. You were at IBM at one point.
I moved across a lot of service providers, within the Indian landscape. The Twitch accounts, as they're called, which is, I moved from IBM to Wipro to NTT Data to Dell Services, back to Wipro. So that part of it, like I said, is a good. It's good. It kept me very challenged, all the time, because the problems are different. The problems that customers have are different. The solutions are different. You got to think on your feet when you're interacting and having these direct conversations with customers. Always important to wear your thinking hat, be on your toes, if I may use that loosely. But also it has given me opportunity to travel, right?
Which you must have used for your running.
Yes. Invariably, my travel gear always had a running shoe, right? And I just love to get out and do my runs wherever the opportunity provides. Just to give you a snapshot of that, I can give you a few snapshots, but I'll give you this one. I was in Thailand and in Bangkok, and then there was I think I did an early check-in into a hotel, but I was not allowed to. So they said the room wouldn't be. I was at 8 a.m. at the hotel. They said the room won't be available until about noon, and my meeting was only the next day. So I had time to kill. I had my running shoe in my bag. So I just at the reception I left at the cloakroom. I left the luggage. At the reception I inquired what could be a good place to run. They told me that the old city is a beautiful one. It's got some temples and so on. I only had like 3 days in Bangkok, so I had to make maximum use of the time. So I said, that's great. How far is it, right? So I have this really nice how far is it question, right? And then they looked at me and they're like, maybe about 10 kilometers. I said, perfect, right? So I made a good, nice 20-kilometer loop. I spent about 2.5 hours, put on my running shoes. It was like 10 a.m. It was like super hot. It was, I was sweating to the last pore. But then I had like a great time. So I carried my camera around and just took pictures. Did a very touristy 20K, touristy half marathon. Got back to the hotel. My room was ready. I showered and I was good to go.
How difficult is it to balance a full-time profession with a full-time passion?
It's not the easiest, but there are so many things in life that are not easy. You need to make compromises, right? So for example, on a Friday evening, I know I can't do late meetings because I need to wake up on a Saturday morning and I need to head out for a run. So you either do that, or then you say, if I do have to do that meeting, then I have to run on a Sunday morning, right? Or sometimes even on a Monday morning, without letting your folks know in the office that you're actually, kind of doing this. But yeah, I mean, ultra marathon training is not an easy training. You got to be hitting 100-kilometer weeks consistently week after week, which means that your weekend long runs can anywhere be between 30 to 40 kilometers, sometimes even more, which means, a good 4 to 5 hours on your feet. So and at one point I was training to do hilly ultras. So I had to wake up 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning to run by myself to Nandi Hills. And then you also have the other thing to balance, which is your family. You can't, you can't be not available for them on a weekend at least, right? So I used to wake up at 3 a.m., start my runs at 3:30, run all the way from home to Nandi Hills.
That's a 50 kilometers stretch.
51 kilometers right to the top, about 5 hours. And then take 2 hours getting back. At 10:30, I'm at home for breakfast and, spend the rest of the day with my family like nothing happened.
But let's zoom out. In terms of career again, do you have to seriously compromise on your career ambitions? Did you have to do that?
I would say yes. It's difficult to balance two passions. I tend to look at it like the 4-burner model, right? So it's a very good way to explain what I'm talking about. Think about 4 burners you have in your cooking unit in your kitchen, right? You can't have all the 4 burners burning at the same time. That's recipe for burning yourself out. You got to slow a couple of burners. Keep one of them burning.
Which are these 4 burners that you're talking about?
So the 4 burners are, are a career, for me, running, family, and friends.
So career, passion,
family, friends, if you were to kind of generalize it. And this was, beautifully laid out to me by one of the runners as well. I kind of pass the credit on. But what I'm saying is that you can't have all of them burning at the same time. So you got to make a conscious choice what you want to keep burning at what time. If it's really career you want to focus on, let's not belittle that. It's a great ambition to have, and let's focus on that. So at many points in my life, I've said, friends is something that I'm willing to compromise. Career is something that I'm willing to dim for a bit. So let's see how that goes. I've never been, fortunately, I've never had ambitions to be a CEO or become an entrepreneur. I really admire people who are entrepreneurs because, like yourself, because I know for a fact that it takes a lot of energy, drive, passion to do what they're doing. It's a lot of dreams that you got to fulfill. You got to bring it to reality. It takes a lot. And I know from my running, how much you need to invest in something like that. And therefore, I shy away from taking those goals myself. I know a corporate life can be challenging, can be motivating enough, can be fulfilling, and can give me what I need, to keep my passion going. So therefore, there is that compromise. I don't know whether my personality really, is cut out to be a CEO, but never say no. But But at this point in my life,
Maybe it's a sports company that you'll probably be the CEO for one day.
I don't know, but any form of corporate life, I think, is a different mindset.
So just hand on your heart, between family and your passion, what comes first?
I think it's I think I want to make my family part of my passion,
Mhm.
right? So one of the things I strive and a goal for me when I want to get back to running now after all those injuries, hey, what's the point that Manoj got to prove, right? I've done a lot of things. I'm not saying that I've hit the pinnacle. There's a whole lot that is, that's there to achieve. I know I'm still mediocre when it comes to whatever I'm doing. But one of the key goals for me is to imbibe this in my children, right? Within their cousins. I'm the uncle, who is the fit uncle, right? I want to be that going on. I want to be running a marathon like Fauja Singh, who at the age of 90 plus ran marathons with his 60-year-old kids. I want to be doing that, right? I want to be in a position to be able to do that. Whether I'll do it or not is another story. But do you have the capability to do it? I want to be there. And of course, these things rub off. I want to be that fit uncle, who inspires these things with in the next generation.
And what is the attitude of your colleagues throughout your career, to what you've been doing? When you said you have been a bit of a closet runner, so
some of them, yeah. I mean, the reason why I tend to keep it separate is because I've seen more often than not, they don't get it, right? They don't get the mind and the spirit and the soul behind the passion. All they see is that, there is this colleague of theirs who runs these 10Ks. But when you sometimes hear a very casual tone that is attributed to something that's so close and special to you, you kind of tend to think that there is a distance. Oh, okay. Yeah, let's all. Hey, where's that restaurant? Let's all get onto that. Let's all drive and get there. Oh, Manoj, don't worry about him. He'll run there, right? That's not what a runner is. It's not like you're wearing your formal attire, and lugging your, laptop and you're running to a restaurant. No, that's not what the
so those
athlete
casual
is.
jokes, remarks hurt you sometimes?
Yeah, it kind of tends to give you a feeling that that's not the run. And I've it's been used very casually as an icebreaker, in conversations. So, oh yeah, let's talk about, oh, this is Manoj and he's a runner, and then so I've had senior leaders who use my running as a ruse to as an icebreaker in important meetings with customers and things like that. Sometimes I don't fancy talking about it to people who don't really resonate.
It all started when my dad called me up one day. I was at work and I had just told okay for marriage. So my dad called up and said, there is this guy, the astronomical, whatever the stars are matching okay, but he seems a little crazy. If you want to, you can just, have a chat with him and then let me know. I said, okay, why not? And then he calls me up. So he said, okay, we'll meet in this coffee shop. Yeah, sounds good. The previous day before we meet, he's like, okay, are you getting dressed up and all that? I was like, okay, yes. I'm also getting dressed up. Like, okay, good. So then this is the first, I see him for the first time. He's coming from his car and then his hand is like this. And he's like, okay, this is how I am dressed up. So he's had a bad fall from his bike. And that is what dressing up means for him, because there was pus oozing out. And he said, this is me. I said, okay. And then he said, that is a coffee shop. This is the park. I think the park looks more, more refreshing. Why don't we go there? Okay, fine, we go there. And then we start walking. And we start talking. We walked for around 20 rounds and I'm sweating. Like, can we sit? Because this is my first, interaction with him. Like, can we sit? I'm out of breath. I didn't know that, you had to sit. Like, so that's how it started. And then he also said that, even if we don't get married, I'll take you to some of my runs and show you how crazy some of these clubs are. And after I said okay, it took a month, and then my parents were like still, pressing me, are you sure? Because this guy seems totally crazy. The marriage also, the dates had to be fixed depending on when his ultra is. The honeymoons had to be cut short. Our honeymoon, that was the first honeymoon. And then we had like a monthly honeymoon for a year after that to make up for the one that we couldn't go.
All right. So let's get back to running, right? Which is perhaps the easiest for me to talk to with you. What is the earliest one can start running, and what is the latest one can keep running till?
Let me just put a number here, right? I think we have been speaking a lot of words. So I would say 8 years. I would say 100 years, right? If you're looking at that extreme. So it's amazing. It's such the sport itself is so inclusive, right? I have been, the Bangalore Hash House Harriers is a very classic case where, I run with a group called the Bangalore Hash House Harriers. We run in the trails. It's a beautiful concept. It's a worldwide concept, and India has a chapter. Out there, you'd be amazed to see that there'll be everyone from kids to 70-year-olds with walking sticks, who still manage to complete the trail, right? It's amazing, and they're all doing their morning run, jog, whatever, right? So it's better you start early, and it's good to get a formal training in your formative years early. The simple reason is because muscle has a memory, right? And the muscle memory that you develop in your early years will kind of carry over to the later stages in your life if you persist with it. Now, what happens is that there is also a certain, the problem is with the younger kids, it's difficult to get the mental makeup that is needed for you to get into really serious long distance running.
Is it because it has less fun, for example, than maybe that's what I'm trying to really understand here. And you can get back to your answer, but just tell me one thing. If you were given a choice as an 8-year-old Manoj and told to pick up sport, or a 10-year-old Manoj or a 12-year-old Manoj, would you have chosen
I wouldn't have
running?
probably, no. So one for sure, I wouldn't have chosen long distance running. No, absolutely. Would I have chosen athletics, and would that choice have helped me in future? I think the answer is yes, right? If I was given an opportunity, there are all these racket sports and so on and so forth that probably excite you in the earlier years more than something like athletics. But if I were to pick up, if I had picked up athletics, I think all of that running efficiency, right, that is required for a good performance even in middle and long distance running, I think the seeds are sown in the early days. It's easier to do that.
Again, I'm going to press you further on that. I could be wrong about the global scenario, but in India, track and field events have not been the pursuit of a rich man's kid or a rich parent's kid. Anytime, I can't think of a single rich kid, affluent kid, ever been involved in a track and field event, and I wonder why.
So it'll all boil down to motivation. Okay, and this is true not just for, and it's a good question, because I'll use this to explain the motivation bit a bit, right? So what happens is that it all comes down to motivation, and the motivation for someone with a, say, not a, with a little bit of a different background is that they'll look at it as an opportunity to exceed and look at it as a lifestyle changing opportunity, right?
Job opportunities.
A whole lot of motivation factors. And that's true of what happens later in the sport as well. Many of us start out as recreational runners, and the reason we don't make the cut into something more elitist is because of the lack of motivation, right? For you to be able to get that leap of faith, kind of a performance in sport, you really need to be motivated extremely hard.
Okay.
Right? And for someone in the army, for example, right? Nowadays we have a whole lot of participation from army into long distance running as well, right? The kind of motivation that they come with is phenomenally different from the kind of motivation that recreational runners, amateurs will ever.
So please connect it back to that question that we were kind of exploring. So you're saying,
So the even for the kids and their parents, the kind of motivation that affluent kids come up is very, very different from someone with a less privileged background.
okay,
And that is what makes the big difference, right?
okay. It's also probably because if they're passionate about sports, this is one of the easiest sports to pick up and support because it needs far less in terms of expenses, perhaps.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah, you're right.
Interesting. All right. So that asks, that gives me an opportunity to ask you something more. Now I see a lot of recreational runners. Bangalore is one of the running capitals of India, probably next only to Mumbai or equally so. And a lot of recreational runners, before they start to run, what they really do is pick up a nice watch, a sports watch, research a lot on the running gear, buy the nicest dry fit clothes, stack up a lot of news on nutrition,
Yeah.
and in the process probably run not as well as what these things can support. But this is just what I've observed. But I think you are the one who could talk about it. Have you noticed far more fads and myths about running than?
Oh yeah, I mean there's so many myths about running, and it's really some of them have become so ingrained, that people that runners think that to do it without those is kind of impossible. I'll give you some examples, right? I mean we can break a few myths here, but running with a GPS enabled watch, for example, like something like a Garmin, right? So it becomes so important that people believe that the run is not complete if they don't post it up on Strava, for example, right? Or if it is not tracked. There is this popular quote that is there, that on T-shirts and things like that, that says, if you find me collapsed on the side of the road, please pause my Garmin, right? So that kind of stuff. And let's not even get to coaches and training plans and precise running goals and targets for each workout. What has happened is that something that started out to be a stress buster, right? People, in recreational runners in their later stages in their lives, pick up running as a way in which they can either reduce weight or relieve stress or whatever it is. Over a period of time, running itself adds on to that stress, right? It has so happened that what, my coach has told me that I have to run at 6 minute per kilometer pace. If I go any slower or any faster, he's going to shed me for that. So I need to kind of keep to that pace, regardless of how I'm feeling, how the week has been, what other stressors are there in my life that I'm adding onto this. I need to keep to that. That itself adds to the stress. So it's a little bit of a, it's really vicious. So therefore, it's important to kind of break some of these shackles. Once in a while, runners especially should get to a point where they're like, hey, what will happen if I just run without my Garmin today, right? What will happen if I run without a cap, or run without my glasses, run in cotton t-shirts, run without a shoe, run with chappals, run at noon, right? There's so many things that you can do. Run without a breakfast. Yeah, exactly, right? Run on empty, run on full, and so on and so forth. So
and all these things that you just listed,
yeah,
you have done each one of them, I can bet.
Yeah, I have. I like to experiment on myself, right? And I only, and I hate to, dispense advice, because what's true for me may not apply for you. But yeah, I mean, what's true for me really applies for me. So a sample size of 1, right? And I do all of these experiments. So typically what I do is when I set a target, right? For example, it could be anything like a 10K or a marathon or an ultra marathon. What I do is I also, at the back of my mind, think, can I toy with this idea for this training block, which could be high mileage, right? Which could be running on empty, right? Which could be run. I used to call these runches, run before lunch. I used to squeeze in a 10K every day just before lunch.
And how long would the 10K take?
About say 45 minutes to 45 to 50 minutes. But I finished a 15-minute run, and then I go quickly have a shower and then have my lunch. So I used to do these.
You do this even when you are in office?
Not really. I mean, those were the lean times, COVID. Just when I had the luxury of working from home. But I haven't tried this at work. But at the workplace. But a whole lot of these. I have also kind of stretched the limit on running on empty, which means you don't eat anything and then you do your runs.
You don't eat anything before the run?
Yeah, before the run, a few hours before the run. So the best I have done is a 36 hours fast, not having eaten anything for 30 hours, and then a 5-hour run after that. A 50-kilometer run on empty without eating anything still, just on water. All right. So I have done all of this. And like I said, there are various lessons to learn from each one of them that you can use. But I encourage runners or even non-runners to keep trying these things, and seeing and picking what works best for them.
Hey, so you have written and you have spoken about something called the body sense, right? Which is much more important for you than what the gadgets would say, than what your reading would say as the right things to do during a run. Let's talk a little more about it.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So as a runner, I have experienced the entire spectrum, right? So there is when I started back in 2007, 2008, when we started running, there was very little that you could do with gadgets. Over a period of time, especially in the last few years, there is a literally there is an overdose of data points that you can get, right? Everything from a GPS watch to devices that track your sleep. There's a whole lot that you can do. In fact, for some time, I even had a CGM, which is a patch that you apply to measure your glucose levels and so on and so forth. What has happened with all of that is somewhere we are cutting out the messages that our body is sending to us all the time, right? Which is a very important aspect in not just in running but in any other sport. The body sense is a very crucial part to your performance in a sport, because there's so much that happens during your training with all of these devices. Sometimes we are cutting out on that very critical, valuable feedback, right? So what is important is, and I like the other experiments that I was mentioning that runners or should pick up, what you should do once in a while is to, like as they call it, run naked, right? And running naked essentially means that you are not running with any devices. You're just getting a sense of what that intensity, that stress, that pounding, the messages that your body is sending you with regard to the pace, or with regard to the effort, with regard to the conditions and so on. So back in those days, I'm talking about a good 15 years back, runners, I know of runners who would get to the start line of a marathon and would be able to sense and gauge the conditions and predict their finish times, and they would finish exactly a couple of minutes of that. A beautiful way in which you assess your capability against that of the environment that is being presented today to tell what your performance is. How many of us do that today, right? It's sometimes you can get it very wrong as well. What your watches show you is really not indicative of the kind of stress that you would have had off running at work or at family or whatever it is, right? That you would add on. It's important to kind of consider the holistic picture in terms of the stress, and then look at your running as a subset of that.
So let me throw a challenge at you. Let's say you are cut off from all these devices. In any case, you're not someone who uses them a lot in any case. So if I were to cut you off from all these devices and made to go through runs after runs for, let's say, a few months together, would you be comfortable with that idea?
Interestingly, I picked up that experiment as well, right? So there was a period, Shashi, where I said I'm not going to run with any device, right? So I just knocked off the Garmin, and there are these runs called the tempo runs. They have to be done at a very specific pace, which is just slightly below your all-out pace, so that you can sustain it for a period of time. Now I had this course, a 10K course, which is on the road, around this neighborhood, where I used to do these runs regularly. Now when I took the device off, and it's a 10K, right? So there are sections where you tend to go fast, there are sections where you tend to slow down, and then you pick up, there are uphills and downhills that you got to factor, a whole lot of those variables, right? And then, when I switched it off and then, started running with just the body sense, surprisingly, the body is able to gauge that so well that I would just finish a few seconds of each other. Week after week, I've done this for about 6 months or so, and week after week, I would finish the 10K within, like 30 seconds of each other. That's the variance that I got. So it's really beautiful. If you allow your body to do a lot of things, I think you can,
Possibly even do better?
Yeah, and you need to learn to respect it. A lot of elite athletes who were participating in events, and even today, many of them, they only run by feel. You can train as much as you want, maybe with devices, but on the race day, there are many of them who just don't listen to the devices because there's a whole lot of other chemistry that comes in, on the race day that you want to respect.
Okay, so what have been your personal bests in 5K, 10K, half marathon?
Yeah, so people ask me sometimes, we always like to compartmentalize, right? So some people think of me as an ultra runner, some others think of me as a fast runner. But fortunately for me, I have picked up, running in various distances over a period of time. So I've had a 5K, my personal best are on a 5K 19 minutes, 10K 39:01, 39 minutes 1 second, and then half marathon 1 hour 27 minutes. For a full, I've done a 3 hour 20 minute twice.
That's my half marathon timing, by the way.
Then I have, then it goes on. So I have a 66 kilometer in a 6 hour as a personal best. For 100K, 100K, I've always done it in trails. It's not so I have a 12 hours something for a 100K. My personal best, of course, the one that I really take pride in is the 24 hour, where I've done a 202 kilometer in 24 hours.
That's about 9 kilometers per hour?
Yeah, that's about 9 kilometers an hour.
Over a 24-hour time.
Over 24 hours.
And the peak running speed is roughly about 15 kilometers per hour that you ran for your half marathon.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, we are talking a lot about what goes on in your mind, how do you practice, how do you get that performance up and running. But you're an extensive blogger, which I want to talk about in a moment from now. And there, one of the things that you have written is that running has given you extraordinary spiritual experiences that you can't plan for, but that have happened over and over again, right? So what is that? In fact, I think you called it as seeing the God.
Yeah. I mean, I used to wonder, and I had this experience, in a few runs. More than anything else, look, Shashi, what happens when you're running, when you have to prepare yourself for a 24-hour where you're mostly with yourself, right? How do you prepare for something like this, right? So there are a lot of thoughts that come and go in your mind, right? Some of them tend to stay for a little longer. So you have that time, to deliberate on some of these. One of the, after I've seen, especially after you're physically spent, right? You start getting into a zone where, your mind starts, deliberating on something more philosophical in a sense. And then one of the very overwhelming feelings that I sometimes get is a sense of gratitude, right? When you're able to do this completely, mind blowing, sometimes it surprises you as well. How am I able to keep this for this long, right? It kind of surprises you in a nice way, but then the matching sentiment to that is that of gratitude. Why am I the one who, the powers to be have chosen,
the cosmos,
right? Has chosen to send this message across? Why me? And then there is a sense of gratitude, right? And that sense of gratitude, is towards everything, right? So you go through a few laps. This happened to me I remember this very vividly. Happened in a 24-hour run. It started in the evening, so we were running through the night. And at about 4 a.m. or so, my wife was crewing for me, so she was supporting. There was this huge, overwhelming sense of gratitude that just it was like a big wave that is washing you off, and it's just carrying you forward, right? And that wave of gratitude is like so powerful that that I started having tears in my eyes, and I started praying as I was going through. And suddenly, it felt
so spiritually uplifting that that's what I truly say. If there is something that takes you closer to God, that's probably the closest you would get, because it was so overwhelming.
And that has happened more than once?
So once it happened, you kind of, and then, like how it came, it just goes away after a while, because you start thinking about other things. You really cannot plan for it to come and go. And my point also is, maybe it does not necessarily have to happen in a longish kind of race. It can happen depending upon where you are at that point in life, what you're going through, etc. There's probably, it can happen, a few times. Yeah, it has happened a couple of times. Like I would say 2 or 3 times. But yeah, but it's difficult. It's difficult to say, compare one to the other in a true sense. But of course, there is always humility. I think one of the things that running has taught me is a whole lot of humility and a whole lot of gratitude, and to everything that's around, and that really lifts you up as a person in general.
Okay, let's switch gears completely. Let's talk about what's the equation at home, because you spoke about the 4-burner theory. You said family and passion comes first. At the same time, I believe they must be also going through ups and downs.
Yeah, absolutely. And none of this would really happen without support from family, because there is a certain degree of, I talked about selfishness. There's a certain degree of selfishness that is there in this particular sport. There's a certain degree of compromise that needs to be there, and it rubs off, within family around you. And the good part about being a runner in the family is that people, come and talk to you about their struggles. I'm trying to do this walk, and then this happened, and so on and so forth. You're always the guy who reminds people of the fitness goals that they had, perhaps, right? So which is a good thing, and that's probably the reason why I want to do it and talk about it, because in some way, if you are able to touch someone's life at any point, I think it's the greatest gift. Family, of course, will have to do some amount of compromise, which always happens. There is always some particular about some kind of diet, or about my sleep patterns, about the energy levels that I have, that I'll be able to spend with them. But like I said, I want to take them along with my journey. There's no point in all of us living under a single roof, but not connecting to each other. So in every.
So I'll ask one question here, just to provoke a thought. Now, someone like you has to be self-obsessed to a large extent to be able to meet those performance goals or milestones, right? And the ecosystem around you will have to cater to that self-obsession, isn't it? Is it possible for 2 self-obsessed people to be in the same family? Is it possible for 2 people to chase 2 differently oriented passions?
Yeah, now you're kind of blowing that 4-burner into 8-burner, perhaps, right? And the question really is, can 2 people afford to have the same burners on at the same time?
Yeah, and those 2 burners being in 2 different passions.
Yeah, I think it could be difficult, right? It could be difficult. I think it is, perhaps easily averaged out or balanced if there is one, person who is like, passionate with the rest of them kind of support. It could be, especially if it is the same sport, I think it may be a little more difficult than otherwise, right? If the passion is, say, in another area, then I think it could complement for sure, right? But yeah, I mean, these are important. See, these are important considerations, very, very important considerations. In order to kind of, see, I look at running as a long-term thing, right? And for it to be sustainable for me and my family, it's important to kind of take them into consideration when you're setting up goals for yourself. So if I'm planning something, outrageous in the next 6 months, say I'm planning to do run to Chennai, for example, right, or whatever that is, right? So you get a sneak peek into what I'll be, right? So if that's the case, then I got to kind of get them into the goal setting. I got to get their buy-in before I set up those goals and start chasing it passionately, because I know that they will also have to do some sacrifices in order for that to work.
I heard it as you wanting to run to Chennai, which is 400 odd kilometers. My mind processed it as you cycling to Chennai?
I
Because I
did,
think you
yeah.
did that once.
Yeah, I did that once. I mean, we all have one life.
So are you still planning to run to Chennai now?
Yeah, we have one life.
Okay, and within 24 hours.
Yeah, they're really a fun one, don't you think? I mean,
No, not for me, but
I don't know. I think I should practice just sleeping on the highway or something like that. We'll figure that out. Yeah, I mean, due course.
what do you do other than running and office?
Yeah.
Do you find time for anything else, by the way?
Yeah, running and thinking about running.
Okay.
Yeah, well.
Thinking and writing.
No, I hope to also read, more. There's always, every New Year, like this time of the year, there is always this, resolution about having to read more. I think that really enhances, a personality. But apart from that, yeah, I mean, barely get time for, anything else. I just love to spend time with my family, right? With growing up kids.
I feel that you're saying this just because we are at home and you want them
No,
to feel good.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think the biggest risk to my running is family time, right? I say that in a nice way. I hope my kids also pick up running. We do ladder drills together now as I'm recuperating from my injury, and they're happy to do that as well. So it's quite fun. So.
But you write a lot as well, right?
Yeah, I write a lot. The writing is mostly to complement the running. So I believe I don't remember too many things, so it's important for me to kind of keep a log. And I started keeping a log, which is the blog that you are referring to. I also like the fact that you revisit whatever your experience has been and try to articulate it. Apparently, there are two different sides. There's seeing a very interesting TED talk, which says your experience and your articulation of experience are two different areas in your brain. What you experience is in a different area, and what you articulate is in a different area. So it's kind of fun to kind of bring, get the two areas to talk to each other in a sense. So I go through an experience and then I try and sit and deliberate and think about it and see how I can put it in words. Sometimes I'm not happy with the way the sentence is framed, with the words that I'm using, because it doesn't bring out the feeling. So it's a fun exercise to do. Yeah. And then of course, when I look back at those blogs, say after 5 years, I'm like either.
No, I've read your blogs and I feel you're very articulate about the experiences that you have had.
Yeah.
Of course, you can argue back that the articulation is different from the experience that I've had, but I find you to be extremely articulate, too articulate for a runner, perhaps.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a fun thing, and I sometimes use the words. Sometimes if I find a word that kind of describes a feeling, I keep it in a particular place so I can use it, when I come across it. It's really a fun thing to also play with language.
Do you ever think about a running legacy for yourself?
No, in all humility, I would perhaps be the happiest if I leave no footprints in the sands of time, right? Because I believe we are too insignificant, in the whole scheme.
But you want to emulate someone? I mean, you have spoken.
Not really. I want to be but I know for a fact that I want to be running for as long as I can, which is, right now I'm thinking more like till I'm about 90 years or so.
Another Fauja Singh in the making?
Fauja Singh started too late. I think I'll catch up with him. Yeah, but why not? I mean, for sure. Yeah. Amazing, great inspiration. To be running even after your 100 years, I think is phenomenal. I would consider myself extremely, lucky. And
any regrets at all? Not just running.
Yeah, maybe that accident that happened. Maybe I should have taken a motorbike or a car to work that day, like everyone else. Yeah, but what to do? I mean, the nut in me, picked the cycle.
One thing that you would change about yourself? And one thing you won't?
I think I'll stick to the discipline that I've had. One thing that I want to change about myself is, I don't know. I don't live life with regrets, so I don't have any.
Okay. Do you know why you run? Finally, after all these years?
Great question. I told my kids about this interview yesterday, and my son was asking, "Why do you run?" He started getting me to think, but I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to that one yet. But
you never thought about it?
Why I run? I think let me just put it this way, right? I have never seen, there is. Okay, so let me bring this back up, right? There is, human beings are a very privileged lot in a sense that we have been given the faculty to do a lot of higher level thinking, right? And for you to get there, it's important to be physically, used, so that then you can get into those levels. Now that can happen in in a variety of ways. I choose running, right? So I give an example like, when you're baking, and I started baking when I was in COVID times. I knew for a fact that if you knead the dough, long enough, only then the bread is soft, right? The kneading has to happen, and the kneading can happen in multiple ways. It can happen in running. It can happen with anything else that you choose to do. Some people choose singing. Some people choose dancing. It can be in any of those activities that you choose. But for you to get to the higher plane, right? In my case, it's running. That's about it. I mean, it's just a means to get to something, beyond.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Thanks, sorry, or a request. If you have to say one of these things or all of these things to someone.
Thanks as many times as I can, right? I mean, I really, really feel blessed to be where I am. I go to sleep every night thinking about all the great things that, that God has given. And I truly feel, that's a very strong feeling. So
Sorry?
Thank you.
Sorry to anyone?
No, not really. But incidentally, I ran a series of half marathons. I called, way back, this is taking me back some 15 years, I think. I called it the Sorry series, right? So I ran five half marathons in 5 days just to convey sorry to someone. It's quite hilarious when you think about it now, but I called the first one S half marathon, O half marathon. No, I have no sorries to anyone, sorry.
Brilliant. All right. Any particular book, any particular movie, any particular phrase, poem that motivates you every time you're down?
I read a lot of books, but none of them really stick too long for me to kind of make an impression. But if there is one that I have to pick, I would pick The Road Less Traveled. It's a brilliant book that starts out with this quote that says, "Life is tough," right? It's almost like a Bible, to me. There are so many components of that, which just talks about the mental resilience, and he's a psychiatrist, and this is a book that was set up in the 90s, I think. It's a brilliant book, The Road Less Traveled. It's a great book, to build, make some sense of the world around us.
Thanks a lot, Manoj. I'm done with all that I needed to know,
Super.
at least for the day.
Thank you.
Concluding thoughts? Anything that you want to say?
Yeah, I think first, thank you for the opportunity. I think, like I said, I really, truly believe that entrepreneurship or anything that you start, is a great thing. I mean, you started on this journey to, to portray images of, to bring out, stories of real heroes. I think it's fantastic. I wish you all the very best in that endeavor.
Thank you, man.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks.
Manoj said once during this conversation, every finisher is a winner. One he has many times, but has he finished yet? Oh no. He intends to run well past his 100 years. And if I know my friend well, he will aim to do an ultra run when he gets past the century line. Wouldn't that be awesome? For that spirit of his and many things more, he will always be my champion. This is truly life unbounded. Hope you liked today's conversation. If you did, please encourage us by clicking on the thumbs up button and subscribing to our channel, and sharing this conversation with your family and friends. This is your host, Shashi, signing off on this episode of Life Unbounded. See you again very soon.